Blessed day, guys, and peace be upon you today. So in this video, we are going to learn how to configure VLAN trunking protocol, or VTP in short. So we are going to do it step by step using this simple topology. So if you have not drawn this topology, kindly make sure that you draw it and comment the way I've just done here. I've not made any configuration, just a simple topology, as you can see, and you can see the port numbers are labeled here. From port 1, port 2 is connecting to the switches. Here port 1 and port 2 connecting to the switches, also here. And here now, because it's connected to 3 switches, now it is on this switch, because it's connected to 3 switches, you can see it's connected to port 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so you have to make sure that you connect them the way I've done here. So in this video, guys, we are going to follow this Google's spreadsheet to guide us on what to do. And the second topic under switching technology, we are going to do VLAN trunking protocol, or VTP. So a quick explanation of what VTP is. I will open this node, PPT, and you see that VLAN trunking protocol is just a way of we can configure VLANs on only one switch, and those VLANs will be automatically copied to all other switches. So let's assume that we have 100 switches in our network, and we cannot move switch by switch configuring VLANs, the same VLANs. Okay, so we can only do VLANs on one switch, and those VLANs are automatically copied to all other switches, all other 99 switches in the network. So that will save time, and we will achieve a consistent configuration, because we configure VLAN number, we name them. So when you go to the other switch, we find them, they are already been copied. So it's very, very important, and there are some criteria to consider when configuring VTP. So these are the notes that I will send to the emails. Okay, so I think you can see them, and how to configure VTP. So without any further ado, let's get into configuration steps. Okay, so I'll open Notepad. As my culture, I always highlight steps that we're going to follow to configure anything. Okay, all right. So the first step is to draw a suitable topology. We decorate and comment as necessary. So as you can see in my topology here, I have made the topology of 5 switches, and you can see one switch is having a yellow background, while other 4 switches having a blue background. And you can see on the comment part, the yellow background is represented by VTP server, while the blue backgrounds are represented by VTP client. So what is a VTP server? What's a VTP client? So it's the VTP server that is acting as the master of all these VTP clients. So we do configuration here on the VTP server. We configure VLANs on VTP server, and the VLANs that we will configure on VTP server will be automatically copied to all this VTP client. So you can see here under explanation, it makes it possible to make configuration changes on one or more switches and have those changes automatically advertised to all other VTP domain. So it's Cisco proprietary, and it automatically copies VLANs from one switch to another. VTP is only used to configure VLAN. Okay, so automatically copies VLAN from one switch to another. Okay, all right. So mods, so we saw that in our topology we had something like VTP server, VTP client. So VTP client cannot we cannot configure VLANs on VTP client. Okay, once they are configured as VTP client, they are only allowed to accept copies of VLANs from VTP server. Okay, and we have VTP server here, which is we can create and delete VLANs from VTP server. Okay, for VTP transparent, just skip it for a while. Okay, and these are now steps to configure VTP. All right. So in the second step here, and the second stage, we need to identify and configure trunk links between the switches. So in this topology, the first thing we do after creating this beautiful topology, we identify trunk links, trunk ports, and configure them as trunk. So this one, any port connecting a switch to switch should be trunk. For example, on this switch, FA1 and FA2 should be trunk because you can see it's connecting switch to switch. On this one, FA1, FA2. On this one, FA1 and FA2. But when you come to this one, you can see there are 3 ports are connecting to switch, FA1, 2, and 3. Okay. So we are going to go to this switch, configure trunk to 1, 2. This one 1, 2. This one 1, 2, and this one 1, 2, 3. This one only 1. Okay. Because you can see it's only connected to this switch only. Okay. All right. So let's begin that very fast save time. Okay, so I'll go to CLI, enable, and config, and you identify, because there are 2 interfaces that through which you want to configure trunk, we just say interface range FA0/1 to 2 switch port mode trunk, just that, exit. So I'll try to copy this because most of the switches are having the same interface as trunks. Okay, come to this one and paste here. Okay, all right, so that's done. The second step is done. Identify and configure trunk links between the switches. So we have successfully identified and configured trunk links between the switches. Okay, it was very simple, and I believe everybody understood that. So in regard, step 3, in regard to VTP, VLAN trunking protocol, choose one switch to be VTP server, while other remaining to be VTP clients. So in the topology, it tells you that I have chosen this to be our VTP server, well, all the remaining switches to be VTP client. VTP server is the one that we use to configure VLANs. Once we configure it as a VTP server, it will be able to create or delete VLANs. But for VTP client, once you configure it as a VTP client, it cannot create or delete VLANs. It will only receive a copy of VLANs from VTP server. Okay, all right. So step 3 is done. We have identified this as our VTP server, but all other remaining switches to be VTP clients. Good. So step 4, configure VTP server with configure the VTP server switch with the VTP domain, mode, and password. Guys, to configure VTP, we need to include certain parameters. For example, we need to include VTP mode 1, VTP mode. Then number 2, we include VTP domain. Number 3, we include VTP password, which is not a must, but you should. And finally, we need to include VTP version. And all of these, except this, a mode can be a server, a mode can be VTP server, VTP mode can be a server, client, or transparent. But in this case, we are only concerned with VTP server and VTP client. Okay, so the mode can either be VTP server or client. So the mode can be different in various switches. But for VTP client, VTP domain, VTP password, and VTP version, it should be the same in all the switches. So the VTP domain in this switch, this one should be the same as password and version. Okay, we just click on VTP server switch, and we come and say we just say VTP First, let's configure domain or mode VTP mode to be server. And by default, all the switches are in VTP server mode. They can create or delete VLANs. Okay, so even if I make it a server, it's already been a default server name. Okay, so default server mode. Okay, so you can see device already VTP server. Okay, by default. Okay, so let's configure VTP domain. So we just say VTP domain to be, let's say, cisco.com. Okay, changing VTP domain name from null to cisco.com. Then we configure VTP password. So just say VTP password. I can just use Cisco because I always like using Cisco as my password. Okay, VTP password to be Cisco. Okay, setting the device VLAN database password to Cisco. Okay, then VTP version. There are two versions, version 1 or version 2. But when there are two versions, version 1 or version 2 is the latest, so use the version 2. So just say VTP version 2 and hit enter, exit, and write. So we are done configuring VTP mode, VTP domain, and the VTP password on this switch. So the next thing says that configure VTP number 5 here. Configure VTP client switches with VTP domain, mode, password, and version. So in these 4 switches, we are going to configure similar configuration, similar setting, VTP settings, including mode, VTP domain, password, and version. So let's start with this one. So when I come to this one, the first thing I do is just make it a VTP mode to be client. I said that by default all switches are VTP server. They can create or delete VLANs. So we are changing this switch from VTP server to VTP client, setting up a VTP client mode. Okay, all right, so let's set up a VTP domain to be cisco.com. Don't forget the domain, password, and version should be the same in all the switches. Cisco.com. Already device name already set to cisco.com. Okay, then what do? We set VTP server, VTP password. So we just say VTP password to be, I used Cisco. Okay, right, good. And finally VTP version. So we just say VTP version 2. Good. And do right. And you go to this switch and this switch and this switch and configure the same parameters that we did here. So guys, to save time, I just want to write some configuration on notepad here and paste also all the switches, because we are going to write the same commands in all the remaining 3 switches. So the first thing you do, just write VTP mode to be client. Okay, then you write VTP domain to be cisco.com. And another thing, you write VTP password to be Cisco. We use Cisco. Make sure it's consistent. Cisco. Then finally VTP version to be version 2. Okay, so this is the only configuration that we're going to do in all other remaining switches. So if I go to this switch, I will paste them. Just click on paste. And now we go to number 6. So number 6 tells us to configure VLANs in only VTP server switch and save the configuration. So before we can configure VLANs, let's just go to that switch and say show VLAN. I'll expand. Currently you can only see this default VLAN, okay, and all these other reserved VLANs. So I'm going to create let's say I'm going to create 5 VLANs here, from VLAN 10 to VLAN 50. So config t, let's get VLAN 10 and name it IT exit, VLAN 20. So we've been told here to configure VLANs in only VTP server switch and save the configuration. So we have done. So let's display VLANs again. Remember the first time we did display VLANs, we got nothing here, and it was only default VLAN from and other reserved VLAN. So let's display VLANs again. To show VLAN. So you can see we have created how many VLANs? 5 VLANs, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So the main objective of VTP is to automatically copy VLANs to all other switches in the network. So let's go to each switch here, number 7. Go to each switch to verify if the VLANs have been copied automatically. I can start with this one and say do show VLAN. You see here, they are here. Alright, so basically I think this video will really help you understand how to configure VLANs. Go back to Google spreadsheet. I will mark VTP VLAN tracking protocol as done.